Welcome into Boxing Scene Today here at Pro Box TV. Look, it's not about the story, but how it ends. Vasiliy Lomachenko calling it a career. Were there fights left on the table? Is there a little bit of disappointment? Are we happy for the Ukrainian boxing legend? That is the question. Jimmy Smith alongside the champs, Chris Algieri, Paulie Malignaggi, also coach Robert Garcia. Weren't able to comment on this. We called the fight last Saturday in San Antonio, Texas. First time we had to reflect on the career of a guy who's an absolute legend, but once again, did we see everything we could have seen? Chris, let me start with you. I know you're dealing with a little bit of cold, so I'm giving you your time to answer.
I'm trucking through.
Trucking through.
I'm good.
Look, when you look at the career of Vasiliy Lomachenko, is there a little bit of that, me being from the old school, from the 80s and 90s, I want 30 to 40 fights in a career. I want to see you at your best. I want to see you all the way up, a ton of big fights. He did have a ton of big fights, but spent 2 Olympics in the amateurs, got a late start in the pros, started out very, very hot. What's your thought about that whole combination with his career?
So, for me, in totality, everything that he accomplished, he should be happy about it, of course. The only thing he missed was the undisputed title at 35. But two-time gold medalist with, I think his record is 395-1, one of the best amateurs who's ever lived.
And avenged that loss.
And he had unified titles in multiple weight classes,
Yes,
right?
right. Multiple world champion, his third professional fight. Yes, he caught 3 losses. One was to Salido, which is a disputed, foul-filled affair in his second pro fight, which I remember when they announced that fight, I was like, I can't believe you're fighting Salido. Salido's a rough guy. Obviously, and that turned out the way it did. But then Gary Antoine Russell smokes him in his third fight.
No, Gary Russell.
Gary Russell, excuse me. Gary Russell. I'm getting confused with the latest version. But that, even in hindsight, that fight was such a big win. Gary Russell was a monster and was for many, many years after that. And Loma was on a different level in his third professional fight. Yeah. Wins that first world title there. And it goes on, wins multiple titles in different weight classes. Was fighting in weight classes he didn't belong in at all. No. Fighting top guys, still beating them, which made the fights more entertaining. Because instead of him just completely dominating them until they quit, when he was Lomachenko like he was at 26 and 30, at 35 he's getting dropped by Linares. He has to come back and drop him and finish him to the body. He has a back and forth at times with Luke Campbell. They were much more contested and entertaining fights at 35, even though he, again, did not belong in the weight class. And then, disputed fight with Teofimo Lopez, disputed fight with Haney. But in totality, in terms of seeing the 30 fights, career, the 30 plus fights, like how you said, I like that too. But listen, when you got 400 amateur fights and you're a 2-time gold medalist and you're a champion in your third pro fight, I don't need to see a long, spread out career where you eventually become fodder for the next guys. Like, hey, you had a good career. Retiring at 37, that's when I retired. It's the right age. You're not getting better at that point. Why risk it, especially fighting guys, younger guys in a weight class you don't belong in? I don't know. I tip my hat to Lomachenko. I know there's haters on Twitter. There's haters everywhere. People that say that he was manufactured by HBO. He was a hype train. It was just because of his style. That is all hogwash. The guy's career, I think, is phenomenal.
Robert, I want to go to you because talk about the style here, and he just brought it up. The style of Lomachenko. Nobody boxes like that, man. They called him the Matrix for a reason. It looked like he was in fast forward while his opponents were in slow motion. What do you think of him tactically and kind of visually what we saw when he was in his prime?
It's just one of those natural talents. It's gonna be hard to see another Lomachenko. He's, you get those once in a great while with that talent, that footwork, that speed, great power too, decent power. So it's not easy. I think Lomachenko had a great career. He went through 2 Olympics, so I think that kind of in the pros, that's why his career wasn't that long, because he turned pro a little bit late in age and wasn't able to accomplish more things, even though he accomplished mostly, except for undisputed. He became, I think he became a superstar. He became a legend. He became a lot of young fighters' favorite fighter of all time, because he's just that talented. Very disciplined, also very, very matured when it came to his career. Very dedicated. He actually started training in my gym when he first turned pro in Oxnard, and we seen what he was all about, and it was great to see his career. And then retiring at this moment, I think is perfect, because he's not going to be one of those champions that ends up losing to multiple guys for no reason. He retired right when it was time, and applaud to that, because that's a decision that very few are able to take, because there were still a lot of big paydays for him, and he decided to go out as the champion that he is, I give my nothing but respect for him.
When you look at it, Paula, I got to ask you this. When you look at his career and the timing of everything, we're talking about competitive fights with Haney in a loss. I thought he won that fight, right? Competitive, I didn't think he started fast enough to beat Teofimo Lopez.
Yeah, I think Teofimo was the only fight he lost.
Right, legitimately. Those fights are up in weight class. They're in his 30s. A lot of the fights when we're talking about, when you look at go ahead.
And even the Salido fight, Salido didn't make weight. People forget that.
Yeah, people forget that as well. But this idea that when you look at, for example, like a Roberto Duran, what he did at 47, dude, he's a 35er at best and went up to middleweight. This idea that he went above and beyond.
It's also, in terms of going above and beyond, here's something you got to consider too. He turned pro late because of the amateur career and still won world titles in 3 weight classes. Unified in 2 of them, maybe 3 of them. You might know better than me. I know he unified 130 pounds, 2 belts, and he unified at 135, 2 belts, right? Yeah, or 3 belts at 135, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't remember if he unified at 26. I know he beat Nicholas Walters at 26. Did he already have a belt when he beat Walters? I'm not sure.
Because he beat Rigotti, but Rigotti wasn't a champion at that
Made
point.
him quit.
But regardless,
Unbelievable.
I'm not remembering, but for sure he unified in at least 2 of the weight classes, maybe all 3. Dude, that's more than a lot of guys accomplish when they turn pro at 19. You know what I mean? Because I always make this point. He didn't give us the waste of time 15 mandatory wins fights. He didn't want to do that. So when you want to see a guy who had 40 pro fights, well, he could have done the 15 waste of time fights that a lot of prospects get on the arm when they're good prospects just to develop. But he's like, I'm already developed. I can go right for world champions right now.
He was also stopping guys. He wasn't like he was fighting the cab drivers to build up his record for knockouts. No, he was stopping world-class guys.
So, that in itself, I think when you look at a Hall of Fame career, I do think amateur resume has to be implemented more because there are guys like Teofilo Stevenson, for example, right? But in the 70s, people look at him.
Sevon in the 90s.
People look at them, these guys, like they were great. And for all intents and purposes, they were, you just can't not count. You can't discount the amateur accomplishments, especially when in conjunction with Lomachenko, who also does it in the pros very, very well. So I do think with these Eastern Europeans, as the Soviet generations come to a close, remember Lomachenko is still born in the Soviet Union. He's born in 1988. And those early post-Soviet fighters some of them were not turning pro. I can name the guy that beat Gennady Golovkin in the 2004 Olympic finals, Gaiderbekov, never turned pro. I remember there was a guy around those same Olympics, Oleg Saitov was a Russian guy. I think he won 2 Olympics as well, never turned pro. So even post-communism, the mentality still wasn't changing over that quickly. Some guys weren't turning pro at all, dominating the amateurs, and some guys were turning pro late, like Lomachenko. That generation is going to come to an end. As these new Russians come and turn pro, I think we're going to get more Russians turning pro or more former Soviet, I don't call them Russians because they're not all Russians, but former Soviet bloc fighters turning pro at 19, 20 years old. And they'll have those 40 pro fights. But I think Lomachenko's generation may be the close of that style of doing things.
Almost transitional from an era where they just fought amateurs. He did turn pro just late.
Well, it went from not being able to turn pro. Okay, now you guys can turn pro, but it's like, we don't really know that game. Maybe maybe I will, maybe I won't. 2, okay, everybody does it. We're going to do it too. Right. It's kind of moved along. So I don't think you can count Lomachenko counted against him in that regard, especially when you look at his body of work. It's a real it's really, really impressive to have done it in the way he did it. And for all intents and purposes, like I said, I think the only loss is that Teofimo Lopez fight, is the only legitimate loss there. And he chased the toughest fights he could get, sometimes to his own demise. Didn't try to do the thing a lot of Western fighters do, where they try to nitpick a name where it looks dangerous because the guy was good 75 years ago, but I'm gonna just use him as a resume filler. He looked for guys in their prime. He looked for guys at their best. If he saw a guy at the best, I remember when he fought Nicholas Walters. Nicholas Walters was the Axeman who was destroying people. He chased him. He's like, I want that fight. You know what I mean? The Rigondeaux fight was the only one that you can say.
Yeah, that was.
But he didn't really chase it either. If you look at his post-fight interview, he's like, they gave me this fight. It's like because Rigondeaux needed to fight himself, and it was unfair to Rigondeaux that nobody wanted to fight him. So they were like, okay, we'll just put you in with Lomachenko. Even Lomachenko, if you remember his post-fight interview, was like, he was too small. What am I gonna do? I handled him the way I handled him. But overall, he wasn't looking for fights like that. He wasn't calling out guys like that. He was calling out the tougher fights. So it's an exemplary
I don't know, did
career.
he ever really? I don't remember him really ever calling anyone out. He was just wanting belts.
No.
He was just
But
he
he
was just
wanted
the top guy. It's like, I don't care who's in the slot. I want number one.
But you know who's not in the top slot? You know who's not number one? The old guy who was number one 15 years ago. That's who's not number one. You know what I mean? Who's number one is the guy in their prime.
No, we're definitely saying how different he is than the current crop.
Yeah, so and there's guys in the West. I think Shakur Stevenson is much in that mold in terms of mentality right now. But he just just like with Lomachenko, people don't really want to fight him. It's like, and he'll go and chase it. The difference with Shakur and Lomachenko is, I think Lomachenko would have took some pay cuts just to get the big opportunity, and then maybe take the money later. I think Shakur had a chance to maybe take a pay cut to fight Haney not long ago, right? But he didn't want the short end of the stick, or so to speak. Regardless, that's a personal business decision. But in terms of chasing fights, I think they have the same mentality, and I think Lomachenko should be remembered that way.
One other thing affecting Lomachenko's career, which is unique to this generation, well, it's two things. Number one, COVID. So he was fighting during the COVID era. He lost to Teofimo in the bubble. I called the fight. I was in the bubble. So there's always arguments about that fight. Like, that was the one fight. Yes, I think he lost that fight too. I thought it was actually a pretty easy fight to score. For 6 rounds, he didn't throw any punches.
Yeah.
And then from round 7 through 11, he beat Teofimo up at times. And then round 12, which is the only round that I thought they both actually tried to win, Teofimo won.
Yeah.
So for me, I had to fight 7-5.
Yeah,
but also, that was in the bubble. That can affect high-level performers. Fighting in
less emotion with no crowd going up and down.
Especially when we're going on a run the way he was.
Yeah.
He was going on a run against Teofimo because it was so muted early on, and then the fight began in round 7, and he was
like
really
a sparring
going on a
session
run.
with no crowd.
It was very strange. Trust me. Also, shoulder injury in that fight. Again, listen, injuries happen.
And one more thing, the war.
His country got invaded.
That was my next habit.
Yeah.
So we had COVID era, which is Lomachenko had to deal with, where we all lost time. I lost time. It affected my career, affected his career, and then he had the war. He literally pulled out of fights because of the war.
And he would have been the undisputed champion had he got Kambosos at that time.
Correct.
I mean,
and supported the war effort, served his country.
I don't think anybody would tell you that Kambosos would have won that fight. So and that was the undisputed title right there.
And so ultimately, the fact that he's retiring when he retired, the only thing he didn't get was the undisputed title at lightweight, which he would have gotten if it not for his pride and support of his own country. Tells me that he did absolutely everything he could do.
Also, the war affected him in different ways. I heard through third and fourth party, there was investments he had on that.
Of course,
I bet
in places like Crimea and stuff like that. That he cost him money. You know what I mean? Like, so there's a lot of, you got to compartmentalize all the problems you have. Of course, the war itself could affect your family, could affect the way you live, and all this other stuff. And then you're still chasing greatness. You're still dealing with the politics of the sport, and all in all, he still accomplished all these things, and he should be appreciated. I spoke to him after he lost the Haney fight, and I told him, bro, I think you should retire because I think they're just going to try to use you as fodder. They're going to try to use you as a resume filler. You not getting that decision is your proof. I was like, they're going to try to use you as a resume filler for other guys coming up the ladder. I was like, if you're good, you should retire.
Yeah, but
you know what? What he did, he fought Kambosos and he retired.
But that's the perfect pin on the career, because that was the guy he had to beat to get the undisputed.
Yeah.
Then he gets him and he demolishes him, destroys him.
Yeah, he's only got to stop him, right?
Yeah, he only got to stop him.
Kambosos is rough, man.
Dominates him, stops him.
Not great, but he
goes out
rough.
on a win.
Go for a fighter.
Perfect bow on top.
Robert, I got to ask you, if we're talking to fans who will point out, man, the Gervonta Davis fight, I would have liked to seen that before he went. That was in negotiations. And apparently, from everything we read, it was Lomachenko who was just, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. Who didn't want that fight to happen, or wanted to retire. What's your thought on the loss of that fight? Is that for most fans the one that got away? What's your thought on it?
It's a fight that the world, myself, would have loved to watch. I think it would have been a great matchup. Both are very talented fighters. There's one fight that we could say we were never gonna get, but I don't blame Lomachenko. He's had a great career. He doesn't need that fight either. He doesn't need to be nobody's stepping stone. I think he made the right choice. He retired as a champion, has nothing to prove to nobody. Did a great decision. He's up there in age also, where he doesn't want to just go out there and make a big payday, but lost to somebody that maybe he would have never lost a few years ago. So I don't blame him. I think he made the right decision, and I respect him for that.
That's why I love working with these guys. They button it so politically correct, and I like it because I need that. I need that because I'm the mutt who tells it like it is. All right. Can I ask you guys the exact age of Gervonta Davis? What's his exact age?
30.
30?
30, yeah.
Okay.
29-30, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, let's see.
Yeah, check it.
I think it's 30.
I'm pretty sure
I-
it's 30.
I believe he's
I thought
30,
it
but
was
let me
30,
check.
31.
I think he just turned 30.
Yeah.
Got it.
Okay.
Put the-
While Jimmy looks for this.
As I'm looking for it, he is exactly 30 years old.
When does he turn 31?
November 7th.
So he's going to be 31 in a few months.
Yes.
So 2 years ago, for the first time ever, we saw Gervonta Davis mention Lomachenko. 2 years ago, for the first time. 35 years old, maybe not even 2 years ago, when he was beating Campos, he tweeted him. He
36
he responded to a tweet.
yeah.
He responded to a
36,
tweet. Lomachenko's name has been swirling around Gervonta Davis's name simultaneously because they're not that much different in age. 5 years. So 4 years ago, how old was Gervonta Davis? 26 going on 27. Prime age. How old is John Lomachenko? 33.
31.
Still dismantling people, right? Instead of Gervonta Davis parading around a fake belt with that WBA secondary belt, could have fought Lomachenko. Could have mentioned them. When people people were tweeting about Lomachenko to Gervonta Davis back then too, but Gervonta likes the bum of the month run that he went on. He went on the bum of the month run. While Lomachenko was chasing, like we just went over the last 10 minutes, the toughest fights possible. And at that time, he also was chasing guys like Gervonta Davis, who wouldn't even respond in a tweet because God forbid that tweet would pick up traction and momentum would be to demand that fight and then he wouldn't take it. So, no, dude, that's not the one that got away. That's the one that Lomachenko's like, bro, you're not aging me out the way Canelo aged out Golovkin. Middle finger, I'm out of here. But the fight was there when it was there. It should have been done when it was done. It didn't get done. Get out of my face.
Sure.
And that's it.
I get completely what you're saying, but what I'm curious about is a 36-year-old Lomachenko, 37, is he a stepping stone? That's
it's still a good fight,
right.
but it's still risky. I mean, listen, we're not... Just because I tell you Gervonta went on the bum of the month run doesn't mean that Gervonta's not a good fighter. Gervonta's an excellent fighter. It's just... when you don't go on the bum of the month club, we get to see how much character you have too when you're pushed. When they punch you back in the face after you land the big
Lamont
shot.
Roach.
Instead of when you hit them with a big shot and they go down and they turn around and they're done. Lomachenko gives you that fight, where you may land a shot, you may go for it, you may miss, get countered, get hit with a combination, you may go down. How are you going to react? That's what we want to see from Gervonta Davis. I'm not saying that Gervonta's not an excellent caliber fighter, but I want to see if he's something special. And the only way I can see if you're something special is if I see you mentally challenged, not just physically challenged. And Davis doesn't take on opponents that mentally challenge him. Lamont Roach.
Well, he is again now with Lamont Roach.
The 16-1
now
favorite.
He is.
The 16-1 underdog.
But listen,
that wasn't supposed to be an underdog.
I'm going to push back. I'm going to agree with Robert.
The 16-1 underdog that wasn't supposed to be. Now you're stuck. Now you got to fight him again. It's different. Now you got to fight him again. Had you known he was that good, you wouldn't have fought him in the first place.
I still think this is the fight that got away because I think stylistically it's a great fight. And you mentioned
I still think it was a competitive fight.
Yeah,
but it's more even at 36, Lomachenko 36 as it is at 30.
For sure, but
32, he probably stops the guy.
So we always talk about primes. We fight into the prime. That's a fake thing to say. It's a thought experiment.
Well, it's not it's not a fake thing to say. Gervonta at 27 and Lomachenko at 33.
Yeah, but
who's to
say Gervonta's prime was 27? I won't. I don't think they
think his prime is now. How can you tell? You can't. The guy don't challenge himself. How can you tell? No, his prime's certainly not now. He's taking knees against 130 pounders.
Frank Martin was one of the best versions of Gervonta.
But we don't know.
Ryan Garcia.
That is one of his. Ryan Garcia sucks.
Nah, dude, what I saw in that fight from Gervonta was discipline.
The Frank Martin fight, I'll give you. The Frank Martin fight, I'll give you. I have been impressed with Martin, even though he didn't have a high caliber win. Martin's skill set, Martin's
good.
Martin's ability, you gotta credit it. But again, that's the physical prime is not what I'm talking about with Gervonta. Physically, Gervonta always is there. I'm talking about mentally when he's challenged. He, like I said, he just took a knee against Lamont when he's challenged mentally. That's what I want to see. I want to see somebody who puts him in a position to see, okay, show me what you got now. You knocked on your ass. You got punched in the face. You're uncomfortable. Show me what you got. I don't see that until I see it. You know what I mean? So physically, he beat Martin physically. He's so talented. That's a good win.
Yeah.
And Gervonta's ultra talented. I need to see you in your prime against guys who are going to push you back, and you're going to show me if you got a backbone or not.
We're going to see it. We're going to see it now.
We're going to see why. What are we going to see?
It in the next
guy's
fight.
still 130 pounder. You got Shakur Stevenson in this weight class. Zepeda in this weight class. You had Tevin Farmer for a while.
But the guy's career is not over. You're talking like it's done. He's 30 years
31. Yeah, now he's in his prime.
Yeah.
He's taking these against 130 pounders. He's in his prime now.
Okay, whatever. We're gonna see it. But again, making this fight happen. If we had ever gotten that fight to happen, the Lomachenko versus Tank.
That was a pay-per-view. Lomachenko Tank. Like legitimate pay-per-view. Not those pay-per-views that he does against cab drivers. That was a legitimate pay-per-view.
Yeah.
Like that's the one. That was the one to make.
That's like that.
But not
again,
when Lomachenko's 36. That was the one to make at 33, 32. The guy's 26, 27.
or anywhere in that range. But it's stylistically, I think because Gervonta is so explosive with a
Yes.
guy as fluid as Loma, speed can sometimes get guys like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And also he can punch. So,
But you got to be mentally on board because
of course,
Loma used to make you quit
so
at that
these
time.
are all
You know
the
what I mean? So-
questions, though, that we
Yeah,
have.
but it's not really questions. You kind of know. Like
now.
now, looking at that guy mentally being that mentally weak. Imagine him with Lomachenko changing angles and punching the crap out of him. He would have quit yesterday, not today.
But you got to get him there. I mean, I don't know.
I'm sorry we're not going to get to see it. I'm sorry we're not going to get to see it. I do. Robert, I got to ask you.
I didn't want to see it when he was 36 anyway. I wanted to see it back then, and nobody made it back then. So I had no interest in seeing the fight when the guy's 36 years old. I'm sorry.
I like the positive and negative here. I love it. Anyway, Robert, let me ask
Like,
you.
we don't judge Ali for the Spinks fight. We judge Ali for the other fight.
How
You know
was
what
that
I'm
his
saying?
prime? So, Robert, let me ask you, first ballot Hall of Famer?
I do believe so, yes, because of the career that fighting for the world title in his second fight, even though he lost it, he shouldn't have lost that fight. He was just too good, and a great fighter to become champion in his second fight. He did in the third fight against a much better fighter, and the kid that he beat, when he became champion, Russell. So you know what I mean. One of the greats, style wise, didn't back on nobody. He always had the best challenges. He took the best challenges. He beat the best fighters out there. He lost a couple, but that's just the way boxing is. Sometimes you lose and it's just nothing to be ashamed of. I think he is a Hall of Famer, 100%.
And that reminds me, the champ made the first point. Now Coach Garcia just made it. The Russell fight. That's an underrated win. But Russell was
That's one of his best wins.
problem. Russell was a problem for
And
so
for
long.
years.
And was for years.
And it was a hungry Russell. It was
Yeah.
a Russell that had not yet won a world title. It was a pre-world champion Russell who was getting ready to fight for his first world championship as well. So it was both their first world title shots, prime ages, head to head. That's how you make a fight, guys.
Good stuff.
That's how you make good fights.
And that's
prime,
how you
hungry.
make a Hall of Famer. That's how you
That's all
make
I'm
a-
asking.
First ballot Hall of
I'm
Famer,
asking.
no question.
No question, one of the greatest of all time, Vasiliy Lomachenko. Our hearts go out to you. Great for retiring, 37 years old. Enjoy retirement, buddy. Best of luck to you in everything you do in life. Jimmy Smith for the champs, Chris Algieri, Paulie Malignaggi, Coach Robert Garcia. Thank you so much for joining us. As it makes boxing news, you'll see it here on Boxing Scene Today. Find out why millions are watching.
Some of the best nicknames, too.
Yeah.